So today we are talking about cracking B2B content idea, how you banish boring and how you generate ideas. So we kind of thought this is a nice follow-on from our first session of B2B comms breakdown, mainly because it's kind of like one of those things is we're in that weird predicament where we actually like generating ideas, and I think a lot of people find it quite tricky. So we thought actually that this would be a good time to actually have a session where we talk to you and share some of the stuff that we do to help us generate ideas.
So yeah, I mean, what I would say is if you are watching live, can you just say hi in the comments so that we know people are there? Because that would be a disaster if we were just talking and there was nobody watching.
Good morning from Ange Lyons, who is my cove. We co-mentor each other.
I'm going to click onto comments so I can see everyone's comments. Hello, we know we're live. Great. That's always encouraging. So we're going to be talking for about 15-20 minutes about how to refresh your bag of ideas, as I like to call them, and get more creative with your content ideas. But we do want to hear from you. We want your questions, your thoughts, comments on this topic. So if you've got any ideas you want to share them, pop it in the comments and we'll come to it at the end. But yeah, everybody's there, our audience is there, so let's get cracking.
Let's go.
So I'm going to put you on the spot, Io. I mean, obviously we've already said that coming up with ideas isn't an issue. So how do you find your ideas? And if somebody has no ideas, what are some of the things that they can do to find out to get ideas for content?
If you have no ideas, I always kind of think, you know what, there are ideas all around you. So I mean, for me, I take stuff from my life, like as I'm walking along, I might see an ad that I think, oh, that's really smart, or what are they doing, how did they do that? So I take things from life. I also for ideas, I also think it's a case of like kind of thinking about the questions that people are asking you right now. So in terms of idea generation and content, you know, if all of a sudden your clients are asking you, how do we do this? Or I'm finding this really tricky, then those are kind of things that those answers that you're giving are things that you then become content. So I think generating ideas from conversations and day to day is a really good start. And then, you know, there's always something you can share, even from stuff that happens at school with my son to, you know, lots of other stuff. So that I'm seeing when I'm out and about or clients are asking me. So definitely that whole kind of using life and the richness of life and work to kind of fuel those ideas is one. I think there's also more kind of tools that you can do as well. Things like Answer the Public, like you can go on there and you can search for keywords and then it'll give you lots and lots of variations and questions around that keywords. So I think kind of using that to kind of get more questions or get more ideas. But you can also do things like go on Google. You know, when you start writing in Google and it comes up with how it thinks that question's framed, doesn't it? So it comes up with a suggested questions. If you look down, they normally gives you about 10 different variations on that question. So again, that's another way you can use that for ideas or inspiration for content or what people are searching for. And there's also tools like Google Trends as well. So you can go on there and you can see what the trends have been for the last 3 months, 9 months, you know, all of that kind of stuff to understand, you know, are people searching for sustainability? Actually, are they even using that term anymore? Or are they using a different word? And you can kind of just play around and see what's going on and just kind of get an idea on what kind of things people are talking about, searching for. So I kind of think there is that real life, but there's also using tools to help you. And I guess there's the one that we did, wasn't it? Even just to come up with the name of this show, after we had our afternoon tea and cake, we were texting afterwards. We didn't quite have a name. What do we call the whole series overall? And then we went on to ChatGPT and started putting prompts in there, and it was hilarious.
It was very funny.
So cheese, but actually that's the first time we both used it, and we were literally just putting in different prompts, seeing what came up, and that kind of, a lot of them made us laugh, but then it also helped with our brainstorming because it kind of gave us different sentence structures, different types of words to use. And, you know, so I think it's just using those types of tools to kind of fuel your imagination.
And it didn't come up with the idea that we, you know, with B2B comms breakdown, that didn't come from ChatGPT, but it helped us get there because it came up with all these wild and wacky ideas. And some were kind of like half sensible. So it just helps as a brainstorm. You know, if you haven't got anybody around you to brainstorm ideas, it can be a useful tool. You know, all of those are fantastic ideas. want to add to that, go back to your strategy. Go back to your goals and what you want to get out of your content, and look at what content you are already creating. What have you already done? How does that match your goals? And can you identify areas that are missing? I mean, I divide my content up into pillars or funnels, however you want to describe it. And I have, like, different types of content that serve different goals. So have a look at your goals and see where there are gaps. Is there a customer group that you're missing? Is all your content aimed at a particular, area of your business? Is there another area of your business that you aren't looking at? I mean, some other sort of ideas that I would throw in there is, are there seasonal ideas? Are there particular times of the year where you're getting a certain number of inquiries, or you're doing certain types of work that you can then hook that into some content around that? You can also do some seasonal, I hate to say the word fun because it's B2B and it feels like you're not allowed to have any fun with B2B content. But, are there some more seasonal fun pieces that you can do? Could you do surveys around,
Christmas hats?
Anything like that? Could you do surveys around your staff? Could you do surveys around some of your key clients and just do some fun stuff around that? And just going back to goals, one of your goals might be, don't forget recruitment. And the fact that, particularly if you're putting content out on social platforms, if people are interested in working for you and you're hiring, they're going to have a look at your social content. How can you, what can you tell them about what it's like working for your business? Is that an area of your content that you are missing out? So those are my ideas.
I've got one more that might be
go for it.
Adding. I was just thinking, like, legislation is probably one of the ones that can be quite dry, but actually works really well. Like, so I've done some really good campaigns around different legislation coming out and thought leadership around that, and ideas about how to implement, how it's likely to work out. I think stuff like that can give you good set pieces, and you can kind of intersperse kind of that more serious stuff along with other types of content. And I think legislation and that kind of what's seemingly dull but actually applies to lots of people and they have to get their head around it, stuff like that I think can work really, really well.
And by that same token, customer client in Q&As, what are the most frequently asked questions that you can build content around? Also, don't forget your expertise. What are you observing in the market? It might not be directly related to your business, but it can showcase your knowledge and expertise. Do you have an opinion on stuff that is happening in the market at the moment? So this is why we don't have problems coming up with ideas. We could do this, we could do that.
Constantly going, oh, and there's this. I know, but you know what? I have to sit there sometimes and just go, stop, because it's like, I'm like, I don't have enough posts for this.
But hopefully that's given you some ideas. And if have any thoughts or questions on that, do pop it in the comments, because we will come to them at the end. So let's move on to breaking out of the boring and mixing things up. And one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this is because we've both had conversations in the last few weeks about getting bored of the content that's out there. Really I mean, we caveat that is that we are looking at a lot of content. So, we are seeing a lot of the same stuff. But we wanted to talk about how you break out of that. Particularly, I think if you're producing a lot of content, how do you make sure that it is all firing on all cylinders? But also, one of the things I hear a lot with clients that I work with, it's just like, well, what we do, is very dry. We don't think it's interesting enough. It's not going to create interesting content. But I want to hear from.
That's really sad. That actually hurts my heart.
It does me as well. And it's just like, I'll be the judge of whether it's interesting or not. But I'll come on to that in a moment. Io, what are your thoughts on mixing things up and breaking out of the boring?
Do you know what? I think, do you know what? Don't be scared of saying what you think. I think there is this whole thing, isn't there, of like, got to be corporate, got to be professional, got to toe the company line, got to basically be vanilla, right? And it's really dull. Like, I know you always do your regular post of, don't say, we are proud to announce. I constantly, if I write something for a client, I'm like, don't do that, Stacey will tell me off. But it's just like, how can you say this is actually interesting and not boring like everyone else says? And it's kind of, I guess you want to kind of subvert what everyone else is doing in some ways, right? Because, you know, if everyone's using carousels, do something else. Like, and that's the thing. I guess for us, because we are on LinkedIn like most days, see it all the time. So I see the same thing and I'm like, I'm quite bored. And I think sometimes it's like people are chasing the algorithm rather than thinking, what does my feed and, you know, what do people actually really want to hear? So for me, I kind of think in some ways, don't follow the herd as much. Actually, what do you really enjoy posting? What can you make and bring to the table that's different? You know, and don't be scared. And I think you've got to sound like you as well. There's too many robotic things, and more people are using AI generated dull as, you know, really dull, dry content. You know, you look at it and you're like, this looks like it's been written by a robot. I mean, AI's got a lot better, don't get me wrong, but some of it you're just like, oh, this is just really more formulaic. And I just think in some ways you kind of want to have, like, you know, different sentence structures, breaking things up, you know, kind of using language, how you talk. You know, I've got really into writing how I talk now, and just getting into that, because actually that's how you kind of bring you to the table, and that's how you banish the boring. And I think that's what people need to do, and not be afraid to be themselves, really. So,
Yeah, and that sort of leads into something I was going to say. I mean, obviously, we're putting aside the fact that, you know, trying different types of content, but if your main type of content is written content, then there are things that you can do to mix it up. As Io said, you know, make it more human. You know, obviously, you get pushback if you're trying to, you know, if you're putting out thought leader, you know, we must sound a certain way, we must sound. But actually, if you're writing for somebody else, which is what I do a lot of ghostwriting, if you're writing content that is going out under somebody else's name, listen to particular words that they use, particular phrases, and just, you don't have to go crazy, but include that. And actually making content sound human in that way can really elevate it and make it stand out and make it just a bit more interesting to read. And I would add to what you said, Io, that, you know, bring in anecdotes and analogies. And this is where it comes back to what I was saying earlier about, you know, what we do is very dry. It's not very interesting. Actually, you can explain really kind of dry, potentially dull topics in a really interesting way by making them relatable. One example, you know, I was doing a piece, and also this works for technical topics as well. I was writing a piece for a client on Wi-Fi security, which is just, you know, not the most interesting topic.
Dull.
That is not the most interesting topic, but I found an analogy to relate it, so it became relatable. You know, I compared it to car security. I won't sort of go into the full details of how it related, but it immediately gave it a hook, because it was something that people could relate to, and it made it more easily understandable because I was relating it to something that was every day. You know, use stories, something that happened to you or something that you've seen or experienced to bring the human in, so you can actually make, you know, thought leader and all of these sort of things just a bit more interesting by bringing in a more of a human angle, and thinking about, you know, you mentioned about changing the pace. Think about the pace of the piece. Can you can you set out an argument and then throw in a question that pitches it a different way, just to kind of, you know, change the pace and the pace of the tone of it. You know, think about different ways of presenting rather than kind of, you know, the usual same old. I'm going to shut up because I could talk for ages about ages about this.
It's like a broken record there.
but this is what I do. This is, I have a lot of, I write about all sorts of things, and the number of times I've sat down with people and go, oh, this is a bit of a dry topic. It's just thought, well, there are ways of making it interesting. You make it relatable, you make it human.
But yeah, for me, I just always think, when people go, it's really dry, and you turn around and go, actually, that's actually one of the reasons I like B2B, because actually a lot of it is turning these really dry topics into something that people are actually interested in. And I always think that's the challenge of business to business marketing. It's that thing of it's like, how do you make a carpet tile exciting, IO?
But I think,
I think part of and length and all this kind of stuff,
Yeah, and I think part of that is, coming back to your client groups and who you're talking to, and putting yourself in their shoes and thinking about it from their perspective. And actually that can really make it a bit more, you can create something more interesting if you're sitting in your potential clients' shoes and thinking about, well, what do they want to know? What are their worries, concerns, challenges, thoughts? So let's move on. Final discussion point, and then we will go to questions. I know we've got one from Ange, so we will come to that. Building content ideas around campaigns and specific services. There's two different areas here. Shall I kick off, IO?
Yep, go for it.
On services? Well, this kind of relates to what I was saying before about building content around dry topics. A lot of the stuff I do, clients will come to me and they say, we want to highlight that we do this type of work. And so I'm creating content around that. But my first thing is to find out who the target audience is, who are the clients, and put myself into their shoes. And then we discuss, what do they come to you about? What do they need to know? What are the mistakes that they make? What are the questions they frequently ask? What are their concerns? What's in it for them? What are the downsides of this? And use that to generate a series of content around a particular service. So start from the perspective of the clients, people that you are wanting to reach. So rather than starting from the point of view, this is what we want to talk about, this is what we do, and this is what to tell them, it's like, well, flip it. Think about who you're trying to reach and what are the questions that they would ask, what would they find useful and interesting.
And that's the thing, it's about them, isn't it? Yeah. It's about them. It's not about you.
Yeah.
It's hard, but I think people find that quite hard.
Yeah, it is. But then, that's who you're trying to talk to. And if you're not talking to your audience, they're not going to read it. So nobody's paid to read your content. So you've got to make it interesting, useful to them. So you have to start with who you're talking to.
So I guess for me, like building kind of content ideas around campaigns. For me, a campaign is basically having like a consistent message, and then you've got a plan of execution of how you're going to implement it. And I think content ideas can be around things like, I guess it's similar to what we said to like question one. So, it could be around seasons. It could be around, a trend you're seeing. It could be around a project. I've done some really successful project campaigns when you're looking at a project, finding different stories, finding different milestones in that project, telling the story about the people in that project. So looking at that project and looking at all the kind of different areas of news and stories and ideas that are there. It could be, we found this part particularly tricky, or this was coming up, we had to bring in these stakeholders and what we had to do. And I guess it's just looking at it and going, where are all the kind of story ideas and those little bits and kind of nuggets of stories, and then building them in over a kind of bigger umbrella. And I think that's kind of what I end up doing in terms of idea generation around a campaign. So an overall theme, but then what are the kind of little shorter, smaller kind of ideas and stories that fit under that. And once you've got that, then I think that's a really powerful campaign. And the idea of campaigns is that there's an underlying, I guess, theme and message in there. And then you implement that message, but through a number of kind of different activations. And that to me is like, that's when you get into the really kind of powerful kind of compounding effect of your marketing and your campaigns, and you get a lot more traction, and that helps you build credibility and visibility. So for me, I love campaigns. It's like my favorite thing in the world, but it is about
I couldn't tell.
It is. Yeah, they are my favorite thing to do. I think it's because you build up traction, be it over 6 months, be it over a year, be it over a month. But it's that whole thing of actually once you get going, and then people get used to seeing it, and all the kind of different stories you can build. I just think it just gives you a lot more impact, because I think you've got to kind of think, how many messages are individuals seeing, right? So actually, are they taking in your message the first time? Probably not. So, how many times you have to get that message out there before people even start registering it, that it's there. So that's why campaigns really work. But the ideas for campaigns, I think you can kind of look from similar to what we said in question 1.
Now let's go to Andrew's question. If you do have, pop your questions in the comments, and we're happy to answer. If you've got any thoughts on anything that we've said, any points you'd like to add, any ideas that we haven't covered, then do pop those in. It'd be good to hear your thoughts as well. So what happens if a client thinks they are boring, too corporate, and how do you get them to be excited about something dry? Obviously you've kind of touched on this, but what I would add is, I find normally just when I get chatting to people, you can start feeling the excitement coming through. I approach it from the point of view of, okay, you are very knowledgeable, you're an expert on this topic. How are you helping people? How are you helping your clients? What are the pain points that you help solve? And sort of go in from that and sort of start digging into their skills and knowledge and expertise. And that usually gets people fired up and excited to talk about. But just asking different questions, coming at the topic from lots of different angles, and it's amazing what it will turn up. The too corporate bit, I've had this I have this issue in that people want their content to sound more human, but then when you present something that sounds more human, they're like, oh my god,
but not like that, that's human.
So I would suggest just doing it little steps at a time. Just, I mentioned before about a little turn of phrase, a little kind of, particular word. If you're writing content for, ghostwriting content for other people, how did they phrase something? You don't have to go like crazy and really very conversational, but you can just, a little term that they use, or something that one example is, I was a couple of years ago, I was doing some work with a property company that are in the healthcare sector. And I can't even remember exactly the topic, but whenever they talked about the people that use the buildings that they were building, they talked about, yes, when they're poorly, they come in, people who are poorly come here for X, Y, and Z. So I used the word poorly in the content because it was very much them. It was a word that they used. I could have said ill, I could have said sick, but they used the word poorly, and I thought, that is them. That is the word that they use. That is if they were talking to somebody. And it's not a big thing. It's just one word, but just, you can sort of gradually just build up a human angle by just taking small steps.
I was going to say, and transcripts are great for that, actually. Transcripts, really just looking back and seeing, actually, they do use this word in this language quite a lot. And I always think, if you are doing those client interviews, it's actually quite handy just to go back and have a transcript and then just see. And then you can kind of go, actually, this is their turn of phrase, this is what they do. I think that helps quite a lot. But I think, to be honest, I think with boring topics, I think it's about you showing the enthusiasm, and as well as having the right questions, but it's like your energy helps to kind of make them realize that it's not quite as boring as they think. And I think quite often it's that, and people don't, because people think, oh, what I do is really boring. And then you actually go, actually, it's not, because, you're helping people do this, and you're helping them transform what they're doing. And aren't you doing, and they don't realize. So I think in some ways it's about us using yourself to kind of infuse them in what they do. There you go. We're people's cheerleaders. We're the boring cheerleaders. Oh, you're not boring. So yeah, that's kind of it, really.
I completely agree, and I think a lot of it is, you know, people are kind of quite modest, you know, particular sectors of the industry. You know, you've got, you know, I use this example back when I was a journalist and I was features editor. I used to edit the retail and leisure supplement, and I used to edit the industrial supplement. And whenever I was talking to people to get ideas for the industrial and distribution supplement, they'd be like, yeah, nothing really much has happened. You know, it's not very interesting. And then we'd have a conversation for an hour, and have come away with so many really good ideas of interesting stuff. You know, I think because it was just from the day to day, them, you know, doing what they do, they didn't think there was anything particularly special about it. And it's
but I think people get battle weary, don't they? You know, that whole thing, it's just like, oh man, that's this, and it's just like, actually that's really cool, and that's kind of what people need in some ways. And you know, I promote some really boring stuff in my life, I tell you, but actually I can normally on most topics I can find something exciting in it. So and I think that's half the joy, is like actually finding those little nuggets of inspiration and really digging deep. But yeah, we are the boring cheerleaders, Ange. Come on.
If there aren't any more questions, shall we go to our final tips?
Oh, you're going to have to go first because I haven't got one.
Okay, I will go for our final tips. Well, I changed my mind on the final tip several times.
Fantastic.
And the one I've landed on, I've already spoken about. So I will just I'll stick with it. But my final actionable tip is put yourself in your client's shoes. What would help them? What will interest them? What do they say? What do they talk about? What don't they say? What are you neglecting that they talk about? And that would be my actionable tip there.
Okay, so my actionable tip for kind of banishing boring, do you know what? I think it's literally just like go into stuff with fresh eyes. You know, like as you do, like when you're a child and they just ask questions and you're curious and you're like, you know, like I'm just thinking of what my son said the other day. I was looking in his book and he talked about, one day when I grow up, I want to have a moustache because then I'll be Italian. Huh? But like, but it's just like curious kind of, but that's how his mind works. You know, it just comes up with like random stuff, thinks about stuff, is excited by the world. And I think in some ways it's just having that excitement and bringing it back. That's what I think. And you can help banish boring, even for B2B. Yes, it does apply.
But I think, you know, I think if you haven't noticed watching this, that we are quite excited about the it's why I call myself the nerdy property writer, because I love all this stuff. But you know, I love finding those stories and bringing the human element to it, and that's what I enjoy.
Andrew Barnett just commented and said they need to spark after becoming so desensitized. I think that, which is so true. I think you know, completely true. It's just like they were like, oh, this is really I think they were just battle weary, man. It's hard out there.
I think that's why it helps having somebody that's not doing that day to day. You know, sort of like a sort of outsider coming in and just asking questions and being interested.
Exactly.
Can make a huge difference.
Brilliant. So we don't have any more questions, and we have hit half an hour, and I have to go and do pickup. So thank you so much for joining us and for all your questions, or Angie's question, which is lovely, and the comment. And you can obviously connect with Stacey and I over here on LinkedIn, and we'd love to hear from you.
And thanks very much for me. It's been brilliant fun as usual. I hope you found it useful. And we're going to be back. We're back on August the 18th. We haven't decided on the topic yet, but keep an eye on our LinkedIn feeds because we'll be promoting it there. And
if you've got any ideas on suggestions for topics, we're always interested in other people's ideas because then we don't think about it. On that happy note, thank you very much. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.